This is part three, what's going on at Pueblo Bonito in Chaco Canyon, and specifically sort of stone implements, production, and corn reduction. Let's start with a reminder that of Occam's razor, that the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. I know that that's highly overused, but it's important to sort of set aside the ceremonial and ritual, keep an open mind, and consider an alternative explanation. Another reminder that an artifact assemblage may appear evident, but it is not imperative to consider this, but it is imperative to consider the structure in which it was found. For example, let's say 1,000 years from now, in contract archaeology terms, a phase one or a shovel testing a site reveals a number of artifacts of interest and qualifies for further testing. That would be considered a phase two investigation with a limited number of excavation units, usually a pair of 1 meter units or a pairing of a 1 by 2 meter test excavation. Perhaps one of these units is excavated and artifacts are unearthed, including a shoe, a beverage cup, food wrapper, a sock, remnants of a blanket and a seat, and remnants of a paperback book. For all intents and purposes, it's clearly a domestic habitation profile, the same as found in pit houses. The assemblage and other test units prompts a full excavation or a phase three, quote, mitigation. The surrounding area of test units is broadened and deepened, and they discover a complex structure of unknown function. Now, this is not a perfect analogy, but it is to make a point. Let me make it clear to the skeptics, pit houses were not airplanes, but that the design function of the structure, or what is referred to as a vernacular architecture, like a pit house, is important. Perhaps more important a scheme of interpretation than the assemblage might lead us to first conclude. In the previous section on corn store, we established that on similar, smaller farmsteads, the majority of square rooms were used to store, quote, something. I suggest corn on the cob after the harvest, and the pit house or kiva was used for the long-term storage of kernel corn, allowing more transportable kernel corn for trade or barter, and seed ready for planting season or daily consumption. It is crystal clear that if you look at a farmer, or if you took a farmer or grain bin engineer back in time 1,000 years, that without electric fans or high-strength corrugated steel, and using materials available to them, the structure would be identical and the requirements for the safe storage of corn then as the same as modern day would be met. Before we progress with the details of the Great Kiva, we need to clarify what was the function of the great houses. These are the larger structures, 60, 100 rooms or more, and a large numbers of kivas. Leading archaeologists with the Chaco project from 1969 to 85, or some say from 1970 to 86, have postulated that the largest and most researched site, Pueblo Bonito in Chaco Canyon. Jim Judge, its director, suggested Pueblo Bonito served as a food bank. Shortly thereafter, Stephen Lexon suggested it may have been a corn bank. This interpretation has problems because of the large concentrated number of ceremonial chambers or kivas at the site. Some say that there are 32 to 37, and Susan Peters, in her 2012 dissertation, I hope I'm correct, estimates in the unexcavated portion that a total of 55 kivas were present at Pueblo Bonito. This large number would probably include the unexcavated section that Susan Peters identified. We're starting to get a huge number of ceremonial chambers. What these researchers didn't ask, in a bank, to safely protect a valuable asset, corn, has very specific requirements for safe storage. What does a corn vault look like? It is clear that the kivas, or round rooms, were the, quote, special rooms to serve this absolutely essential function. Stephen Plog draws attention away from the long-held theory that Pueblo Bonito was a pilgrimage and religious center, or that the massive construction rivals a palace, and that large feasts were prepared, etc. He suggests, some archaeologists, as I quote, some archaeologists wholly believe that Chaco was a thriving agricultural society. Seeds and other food remains are common at Chacoan settlements. At Pueblo Bonito, squash seeds were found in at least 50 rooms, corn cobs, husks, or silk in at least 45, hardly what anyone would expect of a ceremonial center with allegedly empty rooms. So I ask the question, if you have many rooms, 50 or more, with corn husks, corn cobs, and corn silk, the obvious question is, where is the most important and valuable missing component, the kernel corn? The answer are the vaults. If you change a percentage of 18% ritual, I'm not sure how many rooms were included in that evaluation, and you include 32 to 37 kivas for the storage of kernel corn, that puts the ceremonial and ritual pilgrimage interpretation way down on the list of plausible explanations. This finding, with a unique geographical position and water control features, extensive irrigated gardens or rincons, forms the foundation for a trading hub. Nothing has changed to the present day. Large commercial or cooperative grain elevators are located at the hub of many small farming communities, many alongside railroad tracks or major roadways for the transport, and are the center of trade for various household needs. Let's talk corn reduction to digestible levels. Kernel corn is difficult, almost indigestible in kernel form, and can be seen. Anyone who's seen the coprolites of raccoons will know what I'm talking about. Specifically, before grinding corn into meal or a finer product, flour, it is almost impossible to reduce corn with a metate and mono. It's about the same as trying to grind ball bearings on a flat surface. Corn is mostly round, low coefficient friction, and must be broken with a hammer so that the angular fragments move less or bind to the metate. A brief review of the rooms excavated by George Pepper and published in 1920 suggests that, same as modern day, a great deal of processing or reduction was happening at Pueblo Bonito. I'm going to kind of bore you with a few numbers, but I think it's important for you to get the idea of the prevalence of stone implements used in the reduction of corn. For those of you who are not familiar with a metate, it is a stone trough, usually with a slight cupped area, where a mono or a matching stone where the contours match the metate are used to manually grind corn into meal or a finer product, flour. A review of the number of metates recovered by Pepper at Pueblo Bonito: 101 rooms, 101 metates from 19 rooms. 10 of those rooms had 2 metates or less. The remaining 9 rooms, often referred to as mealing rooms, averaged 10 metates per room. If we look at the distribution of monos, a total of 617 were recovered from 63 rooms. If we look at the 40 rooms with 2 or less, that brings the total down to 588 monos in 23 rooms, or an average of 14.7 monos per room. Before the grinding of the corn can be done, it's necessary to break the kernel corn with a hammer to produce angular fragments that can be ground into meal or flour. A total of 668 hammers were recovered in 68 rooms. 22 rooms had 2 hammers or less, and they've been removed from the average, leaving 46 rooms with 629 hammers, which averages 13.7 hammers per room. Is to point out the huge number of stone artifacts used to produce or reduce corn to a more digestible and nutritious level. The total of metates, monos, and hammered recovered from Pepper's excavation of the 126 rooms reported is 1,386 stone processing tools, not the palace, and a few too many for the occasional pilgrimage festivities in my book. A modern day parallel found at smaller scale cooperative grain elevators to reduce kernel corn to meal is done with hammers as well, although it's electric powered, rotary, and has approximately 50 steel hammers operating at high speed. Still the same after 1,000 years, just employing the technology and the materials that are readily available. So let's take a look at one of the most labor-intensive processes in the reduction of corn to edible levels. We have briefly reviewed the extent of reduction from kernel corn to meal or flour, and is very labor-intensive. but the removal of kernels from the cob is perhaps nearly as labor intensive, which brings us to part 4, and we're discussing great kivas and what's going on with them.